Hello, today we're going to be going over the form validation lab. So, this is the week where we cover JavaScript. Next week we will cover jQuery. Now, to be clear, you're going to hear me talk about jQuery this week. jQuery is JavaScript. It's more like people who used JavaScript for a decade, and then those people got together and they said, hey, is there ways that we can make this better? And so jQuery is a collection of functions which address the shortcomings of JavaScript, more or less. But there are times when you need good old-fashioned JavaScript, and JavaScript is also that thing that you know because I think you've taken that class. So today I'm going to do some JavaScript form validation. In the long run, you're going to have a choice between jQuery and just pure JavaScript, which we're doing here today. Now, this assignment is pretty difficult, and I'm pretty nervous about it because it took me a long time to complete, and I always do things before I do them with you. I think it took forever because I had to write the CSS and work through a lot of that, but I'm hoping this goes well. This is a good lab in that it's going to give you a bit of practice validating many different kinds of form fields. So you're going to be looking at a lot of text boxes, so everything from the simple not empty to the numeric to the looking at whether something's got a valid email or date format, as you can see these things down here. Alright, so I'm going to try and make this as brief as I can, but I don't think it's going to be very brief. We're going to go back and forth between some pretty basic stuff and some stuff you probably certainly haven't seen before. We are going to use some regular expressions today. Unfortunately, in the scope of this class, I can't do a great job with regular expressions. Every year I think, oh, can we do a whole week on them or something? And yet again, the answer is no, especially given that we're slightly shortened this quarter. But it probably wouldn't happen anyways. So that being said, I'm going to move ahead with this and start working on it. So here's my here's a starter. So you got a bunch of CSS, you got a bunch of HTML. You can do what you want to do with that. You can do PHP requires. There's no PHP here though. This is just pure JavaScript. So when I do my JavaScript, I write those tags down here, down past the closing HTML tag. There are reasons that you want to do that. So we're going to be writing a bunch of JavaScript, which is designed to... I'm putting all these space in here just to put it up in the middle of my screen. We're going to be binding events to form elements, and those form elements need to be on the page before we bind things to them, so I always do my script tags down here for that reason. So the first thing I always like to do with JavaScript, and so I'm pretty clumsy at it, and I hope I don't make too many mistakes here today because this video will take forever, but then again, it just might take forever, so the first thing I do is the onload deal, and that's not actually going to be the first thing I do when this is done, but so window.onload. So everything's super case sensitive and such. And so onload, I'm going to call an anonymous function and scope that out. This is going to have a huge scope, so it's pretty important to close that and name that curly brace right there. And what I do is I just throw an alert. So I'm not a wizard at JavaScript, but I am pretty darn good at writing debugging statements. So every time I do something that should produce something, I make sure to test it. That's your best defense against making mistakes in JavaScript, because it's very easy to make mistakes in JavaScript, and a lot of them don't generate any feedback. So I really think it's our job to make that feedback. So here I go. Let's launch this in Firefox. Good. I get a something. Whatever. That's good, I guess. Now, the other thing that you're going to want to do when you're working in JavaScript is you're going to want to inspect element and get this console going. So if you have errors, you're going to see them down here. You can also log things for testing purposes. I don't know if I'm going to do that or not today, but you will see errors down here if they exist. Now, this is trash. You can get rid of it, but that just means I've kind of got my JavaScript going, and I'm defining what happens when the page loads. So there's a lot of ways I could do things, and I'm going to create a bunch of functions here today. Like I said in the introduction here, I'm going to be mixing together basics and not basics. So what I'm going to do here is my first thing, just because I kind of I'm not super enthusiastic about writing JavaScript. Let's just say that. So I'm going to do everything I can to make this go easy for myself. And making things go easy for myself is going to mean creating some variables. So I'll create one called myForm. And it's going to be set to document.getElementById. And the ID of the form is my form. Now, one of the reasons things are going to be difficult today is that this is my form, right? You're going to call it your form too, but all these things like what's the name, what's the ID, you don't know that stuff. And that stuff's super important. So it's annoying that you're going to have to just reference things that I named, but that's just how it's going to be. So we're going to make a bunch of references to the form. As you can imagine, it contains all of our form fields. The other thing that I'm going to reference over and over again is going to be this hint field. So I'm going to create another variable to represent that. And I'm going to duplicate because I don't like writing document.getElementById. So I think I called it hint. I already forgot. I think it was called hint. There it is. It's a span. So this is going to be where I'm going to display all my hints. So like when you click on email address, I'm going to say that needs to be a valid email address. Now to be clear, there's a million ways we could do these things. We could do a better job with some things. Some things we're doing a pretty good job with. It's the idea of displaying feedback for users is cool. You just want it to be a cool experience, and I mean, cool is one thing. I don't say that think that's really what you want, but it's desirable. But what you want is consistent feedback. You want the form helping out your users as much as it can, and I think we're going to do a pretty good job of that today. That being said, there's so many different ways that you can do what we're doing today. Next week, using jQuery, we'll do different stuff, which is kind of similar. But long story short, we're going to be displaying hints in some little div a span called hint, and we're going to continually validate all the elements on our form. So I'm going to use those variables. Now, the rest of what I'm going to do for now is going to be in here on this onLoad function. So once the form loads, what I need to do is bind a bunch of actions or events to my form fields. Now, the first one to deal with is going to be this one called, you see, even I'm struggling with what my stuff's called. It's called message. All right, so personalize your cake. This is easy, I guess, because there's not really anything to it other than making sure it's not blank. So there's two things that are going to go on here. One is going to be the validation, actually looking at those values and seeing what the heck they are. That's actually the thing I'm going to push out till second. The first thing I'm going to do is the hint thing. So it's called, all right, anyways, I'm in here. So what I'm going to do, just to make my life easier, because I know how I'm going to do this, is I'm going to be referencing all of those form fields several times. So I'm going to create variables for them. And what I mean is like this. So var message equals, and you know, it's document.getElementById, and then message, I think is what it's called. I'm referencing that thing. Sorry, there's just no way I'm not going to sniff, or sniff, I don't know what it is, but I'm battling allergies right now. I've been battling them for a month. I'm battling them every spring, but right now I'll have to pause like every 8 seconds. I already tried a couple times and it's making this video longer, so sorry about that. Is it worse if I talk about them? Probably. So anyways, instead of document.getElementById, I'm going to say my form. So we can index into our form, which is that thing that I created right here. And then I can use dot notation to get message. So write just a placeholder to message. Now I guess if I wanted to be smart here, which I usually don't, I guess I'm going to make a reference to every one of them. I'm kind of winging it here today. There's no way I won't. So we got message. Another one is quan, like that's the number of layers. So just glorified copy and paste here. The other one's email. Another one is day, and the other one is flavor. I didn't put these in the right order, but those are the fields, right? And so there's an ID that corresponds to every one of those things. So I'm rather than any of this getElementById business, I'm just going to reference them as such. So let's start binding some events because that's where things start to get interesting. So in this form here, what I want to do is when you click on this, I want it to say that I'm going to display that it needs to be non-blank. And when you click off of it, I want that message to go away. That's what I'm going to do. So those are two events. When you click in a text box, that's called focusing. Now you can also focus by tabbing around. It doesn't matter, right? Like if the cursor would start typing in a text box, then that means you got the focus to that text box. And so that's our event. And when you leave it, that's a blur. So we're going to do focus and blur events for message. All right. So I will say message, and if you want to bind an event, you can say like on focus. It's all lowercase like that. I don't know. It just is. I don't like it, but it is. And I'm going to call an anonymous function, and we're going to have a million sets of opening and closing curly braces here. That's focus dot message. And so here I've cut. It's kind of simple, I guess. All I'm going to do is put a hint put some text in this hint right here. I mean, I guess you could call it simple. I guess it's simple. So what I need to do is reference that hint. Remember, I made a variable for it called hint right here. So hint dot inner HTML equals this is our message. So I don't know. What do you want to write? So this message cannot be blank. I guess that's good. And then we should be able to try and test that out. Inner HTML is what you use to set the property of whatever would be between some container tags. The other thing we're going to use a lot of is value. When we validate this, we'll have to use the value, but for now that'll work. And I'm already getting nervous about how long this is taking. All right, cool, right? That's what that does, but the problem is it doesn't go away. So you want to make that go away, and this is regrettable. I hate doing this, but I only have so many tools available to me right now, so I'll say on blur equals function. I mean, on one hand, this is how this has to go, but on blur dot message, on the other hand, you'll see this is going to get super redundant, and there's a tool for fixing that, but I don't want to use it today. So I want to clear that, and by clearing it, I'm going to do that. I mean, I don't get rid of it, I just make it go away. So those error messages, so you notice I'm not validating it at all, I'm just throwing hints at you. Now here's the thing I don't like. So I'm going to do that there, something similar there, something similar there, something similar there. I'll show you. We're 13 minutes in, I've gotten hardly anything done, but here's the good, bad news. I don't know, some kind of news. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy those, because the next thing I'm going to do is very similar. So the next thing I'm going to look at is Quan. And instead of MSD, it's going to be Quan. And that's going to be Quan, right? So a focus and a blur event for that. And also, and message can't be blank, that's not right. Must be a whole number greater than 0. So you see, the only thing that's going to change is that. Right? I'm binding a similar event. Now, let me just talk about it one time. Well, if I say I'm going to talk about it once, that probably means I'll talk about it twice. But one time, you can imagine, we're going to do this set of steps like 5 times-ish. When you find yourself copying and pasting things and only changing the name of one variable, that should be telling you, is there a way I can make a function out of this? Surely there is. Now, the best way to do this, I'll just say it, but we're not going to do it. The best way to do this would be to create an array and have that array store all of our inputs on it, and then to use a for each loop to iterate over that array. And then in that array, we would bind a focus and a blur event to each one of those form elements. That either made sense or it didn't. So that would be a loop, like where this was surrounded by repetition. The only reason that doesn't quite work is the help message is unique. But trust me, there are schemes for dealing with that. And up in here, I'm just going to talk about this a little bit more. You notice how everything that we're actually validating has a class of required? What you could do is go select all the tags that have a class of required. Or, right, I mean, that's why I use required. There's also the attribute that you can give it required. But if you can somehow come up with a scheme for making the inputs that are actually required be identifiable as being required, then you can grab all those, iterate over them with a loop, and then bind everything dynamically. But we're not doing that because this is already going to be tough, I imagine, for some folks, just because we're going to be doing a lot by the time it's all said and done, so I'm not trying to do that. But I will acknowledge that is a solution. All right. So that said, copy paste. You know, I hate doing this. Whenever you're copying and pasting, you know that you're doing things inefficiently. There's got to be a better way to do this, and there is. However, today we're going to do this. Next for day. Oh, you see, these are all these comments. I got to fix these comments. It's like the least I can do. When you're closing, comments are off, it's not good. Well, you're asking for it. I know I could have pasted. This is going to be a day. I know I could do some kind of find and replace. That would be fine, but I'm not doing that. And the last one's going to be Flav. Flav. Actually, I lied. Flav doesn't have a thing. Flav is a option select, and so I'm not gonna give them a hint for that. I said that in the instructions, but if you look at the way this form's set up, make a choice, right? What am I gonna say? Make a choice? I could if I wanted to, but I don't really want to. So let's make sure things work. Layers is good. That doesn't do anything. Email and pickup date is a problem. It says must be a valid email. So what do I do about that? Format must be, MMDDYYYY, something like that, right? It's up to us what we want to expect there, and the pattern that we're looking for is going to be defined by creating a regular expression. So we really could do whatever we want to do, but at this point, I think we're good. Well, we're something, right? We're displaying hints. That's cool. Hints are cool. Could we have done this in less lines? Do I feel like a hack for copying and pasting something a bunch of times? Yes. Do I actually want to do that differently? No. I taught a JavaScript class one time, and I'm always big on form validation, right? Like you've had class with me before. I think everything's a form. So I did a ton of stuff with forms, and I did that dynamic binding of actions, and that didn't go so well. It just didn't, maybe it was just the group or me or something, but I'm kind of hesitant to do that on day one of JavaScript. All right, so we did all these hints, and notice we bound them all in this onload because they have to exist before we bind events to them. And now we're going to do the validation part, right? This is the harder part, I guess. So down in here, what we want to define is what happens when the form gets submitted. So I'll say my form dot submit, dot on submit. The most annoying thing about all of this is submit is an event, but when you're doing it like this, you call it unsubmit or on submit. And then in jQuery next week, everything has a different name. And that's the thing that drives me crazy about this is I do know this stuff, but it changes depending on the context so much that it's just impossible for me to stay on top of. So I'll say on submit. So this is what happens when you submit the form. Now, there's some interesting things about this. So what I highly recommend if you're doing JavaScript where you're validating a form and you're not going to allow users to submit it if it's not valid, return false is really important. So if you don't have anything, if there's no return false in here, it's going to submit the form. And what submitting the form does, it means you're going to lose all your feedback. Because when a form submits, it's just going to refresh the page, basically. So you're not going to know whether any of your validation worked. I know there is no validation, but I'll kind of show you. See, you see how it's not going away? That's because I have return false. If I don't have that, then every time I try and submit my form, sorry, that was bad. You see how it goes away because it's submitted. And you do want it to submit, but you only want it to submit when everything's right. And when you're working on creating feedback for the users, the last thing in the world you want is to have to retype all that stuff again and not even know whether those validation messages were displayed. So I'm just going to force a return false in there. In the big picture, we will do a little better than that. Okay, so the big picture looks a little bit like this. So inside of here, there's going to be an if. It's either going to be if everything's good, then we return true. That means everything went well. That means submit the form. And the other one's going to be return false. Well, I just said that. I mean, it's true. I could do these things, but I'm going to flip them. Actually, I don't care at all. We'll do true, false. It doesn't matter. What matters is how we write this thing here. So right in here, on my line 186 is where we're going to validate these things. So we displayed hints, but you know perfectly well we haven't looked at their values. So we spent 20 minutes doing hints and me rambling about things like allergies and JavaScript and jQuery, and hopefully we can, in like maybe 30 minutes, get this validation done. That's my goal. Probably won't happen. All right, so what in here? I guess maybe before... Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of the logical way to do this so you can see it. I mean, I know what I want to do, but I'm thinking, is there an intermediate step? I don't know. Let's just do it. So what I want to do is, since what I'm going to be doing is complicated, I'm going to make a function. And also because the idea of doing something like validating a field to see if it's blank or numeric or email, those are the kind of things you're going to do again. So I'm going to make a helper function out of it, essentially. So if validate empty... right, so I'm going to make a function, and it returns true if the thing's not empty, otherwise it returns false. So there's going to be this if here, right? So if it passes this validation, it's going to return true. If it doesn't, it's going to return false. And the thing I want to validate is called message. Remember that thing? That represents that field. So we did hints on it twice, and then here we're gonna validate it. So that means we got to write this function. So let's go write that function, and I'll do it up here. So function, I don't remember what it was called. Validate empty. It's gonna have one parameter, and it's gonna be called I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you want to call it. It's like a text box. I guess I'll call it text, I guess. And then in here, I just want to see whether it's empty or not. So this is the easiest one. This is one where we don't even need a regular expression. We'll say if, else, if text dot value is equal to empty string, then that would be a return false. Otherwise, return true. That's pretty much what it does. But the other issue is we need to format this thing. So I want to make that thing turn red, I guess, is what I'm getting at here. So the way I would do that is with some CSS manipulation. And I'm highly tempted to make this a function, but I'm just going to do it in line. When I did this example before, I made more functions to do things, and I don't know that it actually made anything any shorter. And it certainly didn't make things easier to understand. So I'm kind of winging it here, trying to come up with the easiest thing for you to follow along with. Because what I did before was some weird combination of easy and not easy. But anyways, I want to do this stuff. So rather than returning false or returning true, that doesn't help the user very much. What I want to do is mess around with the class of that text. And so I have some CSS up here. See this bad? That's what I want to apply to it. So if it's empty, I want to not only return false, but I also want to say text dot what's my syntax here? Class name concatenate, and it was called bad. I believe that's how that went. Let's see how this goes. Let me test it out. So I refresh this thing. Try and place that. That's why you have the console open. That's on line 29. Wait a minute, line 29. 129, I could believe. Oh, 142. Oh yeah, you're gonna need a space there. All right. Submit, and all I know. All right, so I don't actually know what's happening here. This is a good example of JavaScript being pain. So the form's submitting. So I don't know. I don't know anything about what happened. So here's what I do think I should do. I like to throw alerts here. So alerts are ridiculous, but the thing that's good about alerts is they hang the execution of the form until the person has, okays it. And that's a big idea. because I don't know if this is going right or not. I don't know if I'm passing the right input. I don't know if I'm calling the function. I don't know if this thing's logically busted. I don't know. Maybe text is a bad idea for calling something. I don't know. But when I head over here and I submit this form, I get good. So that tells you something. What does it tell me? Oh, I assigned it a value. That's exciting. Great. That's fun. Bad. But it also... That's interesting. So it's bad. It went into the right if block, but it somehow is returning true. I know this because I'm... Well, actually, I don't actually know anything, I guess. Let me try this. I think maybe it's that I need a space in front of that bad. I know, I'm leaving the debugging in. Constantly people always say, oh, leave the debugging in. I like it. Okay, so it does work. Well, in the world of JavaScript, it's going to be in because I'm not good enough at troubleshooting it just without help to get through it. All right, so it does that. Now here's the problem. I go here. Actually, this form's going to submit on me, so it's going to be a pain. All right, so why does it submit? So I don't really want to talk about that, but I'll tell you how that works. So it returns true. And since this thing returns to true, this returns true. And as soon as this thing returns true, there's nothing else. This never happens. So this isn't doing anything for us anymore at this point. All right, so if that one field's valid, then it proceeds. All right, so the next one, and everything else is more interesting than that. So the next one to look at is, that was our message. Next one's quan. So let's make that quan function. All right, so function valid quan, I'll call it that. And I'll say you're passing it a num. You could call it text, or I don't know what you want to call it. It doesn't matter to me. And so in here, this one's going to be more difficult. Now, I'm pretty sure that what I'm going to write here isn't perfect, so I get it, right? Like, I Googled it. I went Stack Exchange, tried to figure out how do you figure out a positive integer. As you can imagine, there's some pretty involved responses, and a bunch of, scenarios that you might want to be concerned with. I'm just doing what I'm doing, all right? I'm sure you could do better. Go to Stack Exchange, get something that's better if you want to. I'm just trying to make sure that this thing is a number, and it's a whole number, and it's greater than 0. That's all I'm trying to do. I just say that because I saw many more, more complex solutions when I looked at this. Sorry, that again. So var... we'll say num equals, and then I'm going to call this function called parse float. The problem here is that when you get something from a text box, it's always a string, so you got to turn it into an integer. And the thing that I'm going to pass parse float is going to be num.value. Alright, so that should turn it into a number if it can be turned into a number, and then I'm going to have an if block. So in my if block, I want to figure out if it looks like an integer, and I also want to figure out if it's greater than 0. So I'll say, all right, this is weird. This is just magic I'm writing here, but it's number. Number's something that's built into JavaScript. So if you're like, what the heck are these things? I've never read these before. Well, it's because you're just using them. You didn't create them. And the thing that I want to look at is that thing called num, and I also want to try to figure out if my parentheses are okay. And num also needs to be greater than 0. And if it is, then I say we can return true. I just realized I just got totally sidetracked on something else, but I will deal with it in a minute. So I'll show you the thing I meant to deal with, but I didn't. Oh, well, so the problem is this. I can't have this happening. Right, that's where I got sidetracked. So I don't know, like the problem I want to show you, I can't show you until I actually do this. So I do that, and then I fix it, and I do that, and it submits. Oh, I do need to return false. Like I said, this thing's I think I said it. If we don't return false in the submit, then our form's gonna submit every time, and we're never gonna know if anything's working. And sometimes it's working and sometimes it's not working. Now I fix it. Alright, good, it's still there. Now the reason it's still there and it's not blank for once is that my form is false, that return value. So you see why this is difficult to work with, because I'm doing things, but then I'm also trying to take extra weird little intermediate steps so you can see what's going on. Let's try out layers. That seems to have passed. I never called it is the problem. And what is that function called? Valid quan. And I'm going to pass it quan. And let's see how this goes. I reload. Bad. Now, you see how it's lighting up that first one but not lighting up the second one? That doesn't actually mean anything. Alright, so there's two things going on here. One is, it's the thing I keep setting out to fix, but I never do because I keep getting sidetracked, and that is, we're making we're making it bad when it's bad, but we're never removing that. So what we need to do is, instead of just returning true when it's good, we need to go text dot class list dot remove, and we want to remove that bad class. That's the thing I keep literally for the last 3 minutes. I keep saying I keep thinking I'm gonna do that, and then I don't do it. So we got something bad. We place it. We fix it. And now it's capable of clearing itself. Now, why is this thing not doing the deal it's supposed to do? I don't know. Let's figure that out. Oh, because I didn't tell it to do anything. Well, you know, that's usually a good indication. So I'm going to take this thing. So return true also means clean up the class, and bad means add the class. I'm trying to think if logically I'm sound here. I guess I am. I don't know. I think I am. Let's see how that works. I got to refresh. That's good. That's not good. Oh, it's submitted, so that went terrible. Text is not defined. Line 158. It's called num. No, it's called num. Sorry. Nope. Yeah. Wait. Oh my gosh. I didn't notice I called that num and that num. I think I can get away with that. I'm changing this though. I think we're good now. I think. You see, I test it. Okay. ER, no good. 0, no good. 1.2, no good. 4, good. All right, working our way down. So frosting's different. So on frosting, I'll show you how I'm going to deal with frosting. So I put frosting in here for a reason. It's a drop-down list. So drop-down list is a little different. Notice how I just stuff an XXX in there for not making a choice. So I'm gonna use that. So down in here in my calls, I'll say and valid opt, I guess we'll say, and I think it's called flav. No, it's not a string. It's an object, and then I'm going to make this valid opt function. Function valid opt, and this is going to take I don't know, I'll call it an opt. And you see these functions are reusable, more or less. So that's the reason why I'm doing a good job with these, or a better job at least. This one's actually pretty easy. In that there's no regular expressions or anything like that. It's just going to be if opt dot value is equal to xxx. That means you done messed up, and it pretty much means that. And if you got it right, it pretty much means that. You remember when I said I wanted to make a function which formats these things? Because we're doing the same class toggling over and over again. Now the other part of it, the reason I really don't lose any sleep over it, is in jQuery there's a function called toggle class, which, as you can imagine, is probably pretty useful for something like this where you want it to go on and off. So let's try this out. I'm not sure if it's going to work. I think it will. I didn't put much thought into it. It's pretty copy-pasty. So text is not defined. 165. I'm sure I did something insane, and I did. There's no such thing as text, but there is something called opt. And I think that'll probably work better. Do a thing. Do a thing. That looks good. Make a choice. That looks good. Now we're on to email and pickup date. All right. So to this point, I've done some interesting things, and now we're going to do the most interesting things. So email. What the heck's an email address? Well, that's a good question. An email address has an at in it and has a dot in it, and the dot is after the at. Now, an email address has certain patterns like that. There's also a whole bunch of other attributes. Like, there's just things that are true about email addresses that I'll never understand. I could spend the rest of the week understanding what is an email address, what's a valid email address look like, and I wouldn't be able to get it. So what I'm going to do, and not feel bad about it at all, is I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to find someone else's regex rule that they wrote for email. There's some crazy ones I've seen that are like hundreds of characters long, and I guess if you want to do that, you can. I'm kind of going to go over. I'm going to use the first one I find, which is weird, but I guess I'll do it. So regex. We'll go regex JavaScript. I think it's important to say JavaScript because these things could come in different formats. So I like to do JavaScript. All right. I don't know. Do we go Stack Overflow or we go W3 Resource? I don't know. Email regex.com. So the problem is, you see, this one's Grizzly right here. You're like, what in the heck, right? I mean, if you're thinking that, that's okay, because you probably should. But that right there doesn't work exactly with what I wanted to do. I'm going to do something simpler. Now, it's not that I don't want to do a good one. It's just that look at that thing. That's got word wrap on it. We're going to be copying and pasting this thing, and it's just going to be. I've seen so many times where people copy and paste these, and they're missing like the beginning or the end of it. Look, make that work if you're going to do something good. This is the one I went with earlier, and it's dumb. It's not very good, but it works okay. And it's also TylerMcGinnis.com. I don't know who the heck Tyler McGinnis is, but I can tell you that website was easy to say. So I'm going with that one. If that's the one you're looking at, great. If not, fine. Where's my rule? Here's my rule. So basically you want one with forward slashes wrapping it up. There's two ways to make regular expressions. The other one is using a constructor. I'm just using this one because it's easier. This one's real easy. It's not perfect, but that's okay. I could do it perfect if I wanted to, I guess. So what I'm going to do now is call that function, because I always forget to call them. So, and valid email. And if you want to use a better function, then go ahead and do that. I'm just using something. Right? I know perfectly well I'm not teaching you enough about regular expressions to build any kind of an understanding about this. So first result's going to be fine for me. And probably you. I would love to spend more time on regular expressions, but they are not easy at all, and I'm not sure how interested anyone is. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'd like to cover in this class that I don't really have time to cover in this class, and some of them, like this, I don't know that you can just, dip your toe in the water and get mastery of it. If you can understand the purpose of regular expressions and that all the good ones that you would ever need or already exist, well, then I think you're probably in pretty good shape. So for this, I am going to create a regex. So var regex equals, and then so the weird thing here is those forward slashes are your escape. It's like they're like your backticks for a string, but it's not a string, so it looks weird like that. If you're just finding some better rule somewhere on the internet, there's a good chance that it doesn't have those escape, or I don't know what you call them. I mean, I do want to call them escapes, but there's a good chance that it's not wrapped in those forward slashes. You might have to add those. And I find when people copy and paste these, I've done this in class many times, and it's crazy how bad this goes. I don't know why. It's like the beginning's missing or the end's missing, and I don't know, but it is. But that's why I kind of like this horrible short one, because it's at least kind of easy to use. Then from here, same pattern. We're going to do an if, and we're going to do an else. I know. I did something else. So I'm going to say regex dot test, and I want to pass it the value that I'm looking at, which is email dot value. So I'm going to be taking this and comparing it to this regex rule. If it returns true, then that means it matches. If it doesn't, then that means if it returns false, then it means it doesn't match that pattern. So this is my good case, and this is my bad case. I feel terrible about copying and pasting, but every other time we do this, I make some kind of a function out of it. So now I guess, let's just say I'm teaching you what it looks like when you should be asking yourself whether you need a function or not. That said, here's the scheme I can come up with. Now, look, if you were going to have regular expressions for every one of these things, you could have one generalized function where you pass that function the input and the regular expression rule, and it would construct it just like this. However, we didn't really do regular expressions for things like the number of layers and the message. Now, that being said, we could have done regular expressions, but I'm trying to give you a look at the idea that regular expressions are the most powerful tool you have, but it does, not everything has to be a regular expression. So sure, we could have generalized this. You can see I feel obligated to explain my hackery at times. Not all times, though, as you know. So let's see if this works. And those are called email. My voice is bothering me. I feel like I can't breathe through my nose at all, so it seems ridiculous. I don't know how it actually sounds. Probably ridiculous. And some stuff. I'll be honest. I'm not mad at this thing. This seems like that's as good as I would do if I was making an email validator. Now you saw, like, the RFC definition for what is an email, that was an option for us. Go ahead and use that if you want to. See if you can get it working. I'm just trying to make this real easy. Like I said, if I do that one, my scroll bar is going to go over 500 characters, and then you can't see the end of my line, and it just gets to be problematic. So the last thing here left to look at is the MMDDYYYY thing. MMDDYYYY validator. I'm for sure going to copy that one because I don't remember. I don't know. It's too weird. Now, do you see what so we're going to use a regular expression here as well, and you will see in a minute what I mean by we could have generalized all of these to one function and just had it set up where you pass it the input that you're looking at, the regular expression rule, and then have it do its thing. Day, I guess we'll call it. So it's going to be similar. I'm going to go var regex, and I'm going to define a new regex rule. Now for this one, okay, this one's going to be an adventure. Regex JavaScript MMDDYYYY. Now you could, I hope you like how I said that. That was computer style. So if we could have written this one on our own. I just know that I'm not spending enough time on regex this year. We never do spend enough time on regex. Regex is one of the two things that I've kind of had to clip from the course this year because I'm putting it online. I don't have an infinite amount of time to get everything ready. Now, that being said, I think that my previous students generally have a very limited understanding of regular expressions, and we don't ever practice it enough, so you're getting particularly shorted on it, but then at the end of the day, I'm not really sure that you're behind anyone else, because if you understand that you're reinventing the wheel in all likelihood, let's go Stack Overflow, so just so I can say I'm keeping it fair. I did one, I don't know, I'll go with that one. That's the easiest one to copy and paste. Now, you should know better than doing the easiest thing, but I'm just trying to get this done. Let's see how this goes. Let's see. Yeah, see that didn't do anything. Why did that not do anything? So I've got this regex.test. I'm testing the value. If it matches, I remove it, return true, otherwise bad, and let's see how it goes. I'm not sure how it'll go. Place order. So it doesn't seem like it's doing anything. Oh, isn't that interesting? I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. So it only lights up when it's like it passes when I do nothing. It seems like that's what it's doing. Now there's a problem. This thing's actually not the word. Okay. If you just do total garbage dates, it's not going to work. And I think this thing actually requires the year to start with a 19 or a 20. I think is, but there is some weird stuff happening here, and I don't love it. Now let me show you what I mean by what it's requiring. See that right here? That means 19 or 20. So there's some limits on this. So we've got an interesting issue here. It works kind of sort of the way it should, but the thing I'm noticing is that this thing actually, a blank actually gets through it. Like it does its job on everything. What if I do a space? If there's nothing there, it's passing. So that seems to be a shortcoming with this particular regular expression right here. This is a total disaster because I'm testing out my original one I did, and I now realize I had the same problem in that one too because I used the same regex rule. This is also where not knowing more about regex hurts us a little bit. So let me tell you what I think the problem is here. I had to look at it for a minute. See these question marks here? It's because there's optional things, right? Like basically, I think what we're getting away with here is zeros passing through. So all these parts of this pattern, it's letting us get away with zeros. Now I'll show you what I mean. Here's like my little test I made up for this. So do you see what it says? What this says here is has to start with 19 or 20, and that question mark. So, and then the rest of it's 2 digits between 0 and 9. So my little test here was like, if I start off with 18, does that work? And it doesn't. Probably because I didn't refresh. And so what that's doing, I don't know actually. And you see how that passes? Right, like that shouldn't pass. The reason it passes is you don't want that. Like that means optional. So do I want to rewrite this whole thing? Not really. But if you put a 1 in curly braces, that means it has to have one of those things. Exactly one. And you see how now I don't pass it? And now I can go 19, 18. Now the problem is all these question marks in here that we have. And I don't really want to rewrite this because I'm getting right up against the limit where I can't really even process a video if it goes any longer. So let's just say that this is not the worst thing in the world. Now, what I would say, if you wanted to be a hack about this, and I kind of do, I guess, how about we just give it a quick call to validate empty? Because that should catch it if it's empty, because that's probably the thing that we care about. And hey, we get to reuse a function too, so now everyone's a winner. And I think that's going to, I think that is the quickest, hackiest solution I can do to avoiding this scenario here. Right, and so I think we're good. All right, so let's finish up the form processing. I want this to be bad because I want errors. So we're a little bit dysfunctional. We've done almost everything, but this part in here. So remember this return true business? It's time to turn that on, and it's time to turn that off. Now, just because you're going to lose everything now, so let's throw an alert here, because really an alert's the only way we're going to know if this is actually working or not. So, thank you. Your cake will be ready in 6 weeks. And the other one will be false. Will be alert. Please complete the red form fields. And I think now we're pretty good. Let me reload this thing. I submit it. Okay. See, that's the problem, is I went through all those efforts to make this thing not submit, but I did something wrong on line 241. If you have syntax errors, then you're not going to be able to stop it from submitting, and your alerts are not going to happen. Alright. So you see how I think you might have a problem with the idea that it only lights up one thing at a time. That's okay. I've seen worse. I've seen forms that don't even identify what the problem is. So, yeah, this thing picks through the form one thing at a time. Okay, not the end of the world. And 2011. I think I'm going to blow up there. See, good. I don't know, I think it's good. Strawberry, place order. Thank you, your cake will be ready in 6 weeks. Submit, everything's gone. And I think we've got some cool form validation going on. So we get hints. So we've got hints on focus. We've got blurs triggering that hint going away. We've got regular expressions. We are stopping our form from submitting unless everything's right. And that's a pretty good little introduction to validating forms. It's more than an introduction. Now let me recap one more time. So if we were trying to be efficient about this, which was not my focus today, we would have found a way to select all the stuff in there that we wanted to validate, and we would have put those into an array, which is very doable, and then we would have iterated over that array and put a focus on a blur on each one of them, and that we would have also had to pass that thing the hint message. And trust me, there are all kinds of ways that you can bury the hint message in these inputs. Like, trust me, there's properties that you can put in here that you can pull out and use for those, and that's the best way to do that. The other thing we could have done for the validation is we could have set up a generalized validation formula where you passed it a regex and the thing that you want to validate, and it could have handled itself that way. We certainly could have used regex for every one of these, but I try to not make this all about regex. And it's not that regex isn't the right tool for this, because it most certainly is, but it's just also that I'm not that confident in your ability to manipulate regex or even troubleshoot ones that you find on the internet, so I'm not trying to make this all about regular expressions. That being said, as painful as regular expressions are to work with, they are the awesome solution to some really complicated problems, so you shouldn't hesitate to use them. The thing to take away from this is, yes, they are difficult to get working sometimes, but once you get them working, you can use them forever. Right? Like, you'd be crazy to be writing 18 different validate email functions. Just do it right once, and then you can reuse it forever. So, alright, so hopefully you now have a handle on how I might validate this form. And this is something that you can apply to all the forms that you make going forward. Next week, we'll look at some more validation using jQuery. Thanks for watching.